If you're new to these live streams, the reason why we do them is because inside of our trainings, where some of our students are really mastering coaching and going deep dive into some of the dynamics of being a great coach in a variety of areas. In this particular training, we're going through assessment coaching, which is using what you're about to see, the kind of tools and graphs that can accelerate your ability to understand an individual or a group and the dynamics and the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that these particular individuals and groups go through. So the reason why, though, as I just mentioned a second ago, that we do these live streams is because we only have so much time in the training sessions to cover the finer points of these vast and myriad aspects of running coaching sessions and making a difference for groups and individuals and businesses and just about any area that you might want to impact somebody. You can impact them using coaching and assessment coaching, for that matter. So that's really the purpose of doing these and why I'm here for you today, whatever time it is for you. So today, we're going to cover typical team dynamics. Now, what I mean by that is that, what you can't expect when you're trying to read a graph with a team on it and try to understand a team is you can't expect that just because you know different patterns that might show up in teams that you're going to know that team. You're going to have to figure that out for yourself. Every team is different. In fact, as you might have figured out by this point in assessment immersion training, people are not all the same. We're as diverse as snowflakes, and so are the teams that people populate, the teams that we make up in our lives, our families, our businesses, our communities. We're a part of all sorts of different teams. So not all teams are created equal, even though we're saying typical here. I'm putting it in quotes here because the fact is there's no such thing, really. No team is typical. But I am going to give you a sense of what the typical dynamics are in a variety of different graphs that you might see for some teams, so we can get a sense of that. And I'm going to read them in real time right here, fresh. Really, literally, all I did is populate some typical teams that I've seen and heard about and maybe worked with in the past. And I'm going to actually do a graph read for you live tonight. We're going to do actually 7 or 8 of them. A bunch from the behavioral dynamics and a bunch from values dynamics as well. And this is going to give you, really don't have a crib sheet for groups at this point like we have for individuals, where we have kind of cliff notes on what a graph looks like and what it means. But this is the beginning of it. Let's put it that way. This is our quick and dirty method for giving you a bit of a crib sheet. And I'll give you access to the slides that we're going to use for this, because we're actually going to do it on screen tonight with a highlighter. So when people join groups, when people join a group, they become more than who they are. I mean, we really talked about this last time. We talked about different kind of models of group dynamics, of the way people operate within, how they deal with other people. I think that was the title of the live stream. And so when we are individuals, you can read a graph, you can read a person, you can understand kind of what makes them tick. But when that individual joins a group, they mutate into something vastly different than just the original manifestation of the individual. I go into a group, I'm running a training or a part of my family or whatever. I'm not the same as just me on my own as the individual that you might read in my graphs. And so it's really important, before we start to look at these examples, that you appreciate that even though the individuals in the groups are still, they're still there. It's not like they're invisible, like they really have mutated and become someone else. They don't operate the same way in a group and even in different groups than they do as individuals. So I'll give you a couple examples of this. So let's start outside of the human species. So you take a bird alone. So bird alone, flying around, flying straight. Well, that bird joins a flock. And if you've seen these flocks of birds, they go in circles, they go all over the place. I mean, it's nuts. That same bird, all by itself, completely different direction, completely different behavior, right? So bird alone, different from bird in a flock. Let's go a little bit higher up the evolutionary ladder here. So now we get an ape. You're at the zoo and you see the chimps or the gorillas or the monkeys, and so you got an ape alone, and it's just kind of sitting there. It's probably kind of sleepy. It's not really doing anything very exciting. You wonder why you even went to the zoo in the first place, to see that boring creature. But then the pack shows up, right? Pack shows up, and all of a sudden they're all screaming and throwing sticks and stuff at each other. I mean, it's a completely different dynamic, isn't it? So what happened to that individual, that quiet, safe little ape, in the corner? All of a sudden it's a shrieking, crazy being. So, I mean, these are typical, obvious examples from the animal kingdom. Let's take the humans, the human animal. So single human, think about this, single human, individual human, think about just a human there, picture me or yourself or someone like us, versus Republicans, right? Nowadays, with the polarization in our politics, we just say the word and it, people turn into a porcupine, right? So first there's an individual, all of a sudden we've got this group of Republicans. It's like, watch out, right? Or Democrats, if that's your, flavor of ugliness, or Christians or Muslims or a whole variety of other potential groups. So we started with this individual, and all of a sudden we attribute them to a group, not even attribute to them, think of them as a part of a group, but just move them into that group, right? And we have people that act like what we would consider predictable, normal, sane beings, and all of a sudden they're a part of a group and they act in ways that maybe they don't think, but we might judge them as outside the lines of what's okay or what's normal or what's typical or what we'd expect from an individual, from a human, right? So human individuals is one thing, human group is another. And we want to draw that line, not because the individual is not there in the group. Some people would argue that the individual just disappears. You're not even an individual, they would say. That's a philosophy. But let's just keep that for now. Let's assume that, you're still around, you're still an individual just because you're part of a group. You didn't disappear, you didn't die out. But now you and the interactions are happening within that group that you're included in. It's another dynamic. It's not just the individual anymore. And there's more to your part of that group than just what the individual judgments that we would make about you would dictate or would tell us or you would understand. So you must appreciate that these groups are not just singular, like a bunch of individual things coming together. It's more than that. The group is almost always more than the sum of its parts. If it truly is a team, if it truly is a group. Does that make sense? Hope it does. So in these examples that we're going to cover, you're gonna see that these groups are emerging from individuals, but they are not the individuals. And so I'm just going to do a quick share here, and we're going to have a weird effect until I move everything aside. So you should be able to see, our slides here now. And for the purpose of a little bit of on-screen marking, we are gonna open up our highlighter. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to explain to you what you should be looking for as we're going through these different team dynamics, okay? So these examples should make you think about the following things. Number one, who you put on the team matters greatly. Who you put on the team actually matters. And who you put on the team not only matters, but it can change the entire team destiny. Changes the destiny of the team, who you put on the team. 2, how the team interacts can be greatly improved when the leader, and ideally the team members as well, understand the others on the team and how the team operates as a whole. Right? Like when the leader understands the team and how the team operates as a whole, that's going to greatly improve the dynamics within the team, how the team interacts, possibly the performance of the team. If everybody on the team appreciates how everybody else is operating as individuals and how the team as a whole kind of has precipitated from these individuals, become its own entity, that can increase and improve the interactions on the team at a minimum, if not the communication, the dynamics of the team, and the performance of the team. So who is on the team matters. How the team interacts can be improved simply by awareness. And then 3rd, each team has different strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Not all teams are created equal. Different teams are going to be better at different things, worse at different things, have different problems, different upsides, different downsides. So those are the things you want to be looking for. Look for how these teams are strong in some areas and weak in others. Look for how who's on the team actually makes the team different. It actually alters the dynamic of the team and how that team is its own entity, and can change the destiny of that team. And then notice that the awareness of these individuals on the team as to what's going on with the team could actually make a difference as well. So with that said, let's jump in. So we're going to start with behavioral examples. And can I do this with okay, so we basically don't have can't operate the mouse while we're highlighting, but that's okay. We'll just switch back and forth. So here is a behavioral graph. And now for those that don't have a clue what this is, just suffice to say that these different letters signify different ways of behaving. It signifies a different way that someone might produce results. And so I'm not going to review this for your benefit here. Take it to training if you want to learn this stuff. There's a lot of places you can learn DISC and the dynamics of DISC, but I'm going to just describe some of the things here, and then we'll talk about the SWOT analysis. We'll talk about what the coaching might be for that team and how I might typically describe this team as well. So first, let's just describe the team. So notice that everybody's basically a D, right? And so these are all dominant, goal-oriented, short fuse, go-get-'em types, right? So I just think of this just as a shorthand. I would describe this as a bunch of Indian chiefs or just a group of leaders, basically. This is for oversimplification. It's just leaders. Okay, so one of the let's get to the SWOT analysis here. Now that we've described this, you think of it just a bunch of people who are all in charge. They're all running the show. They all think they're running the show. They all think they're the best. Strong egos. You know the type, right? So a group of them is going to be very interesting because, first of all, they're all trying to run the show. They're all trying to dominate each other and the team. So too many cooks in the kitchen, right? Too many Indian chiefs, too many people trying to be in charge. This is not going to go well in a lot of ways, chances are, if there is a need for some hierarchy or if there is a need for some kind of operational, some governance here. This is not going to be a well-governed team, I would guess. Not because there aren't people that are happy to govern, but because there's too many of them, right? And so there's going to be a lot of battles, a lot of wars, a lot of people coming and going from the team, a lot of fallout from that, chances are. So that's a weakness right there, chances are. It's a threat right there. Now, what are the strengths of this team? Well, strengths are obviously they're going to pick a direction and they're going to go in it. The weakness could be that you could have, different leaders deciding to go in different directions. And then that's not a team at all. It's just a bunch of people trying to run each other's lives, a bunch of people just it's a bunch of individuals fighting for their way, right? So that could be also a weakness or a problem there. But these individuals, if they can at all cooperate, which is unlikely, but let's say they somehow get together, some one of these are really the leader, the one that's really running the show, and they pick a direction, they're going to be immensely powerful. I know a team like this of salespeople, and they create, I mean, it's not a lot of salespeople, it's like 5-6 salespeople, and they together produce, $5 million a year. It's insane. So you have these individuals have a lot of power as a team if they can actually team up. So what else? Other strengths of these individuals are going to get to something. They're going to produce a result, if nothing else. One of the bigger weaknesses, again, though, is that they're going to fight each other. They're going to battle each other. There's going to be a regular amount of anger, chances are, on this team. And that's going to be very problematic on a team basis because the sparks are going to continue to fly, and there's going to be probably too much drama here. Probably too much drama for them to even survive long-term unless there is a solid hierarchy. That's now getting to the coaching. I would say the coaching for this team would be they absolutely need hierarchy. And they need to respect that hierarchy. They got to respect it. And they're going to need to, no, I wouldn't say calm down, but they're going to need to have a certain set of rules that they operate by so that they can survive each other, right? So these are really critical aspects for this team that I would be coaching them on, okay? And a certain amount of, patience and support is lacking on the team. So they're going to really need to work on these pieces because there are going to be times for any team that is absolutely required for the team to survive, right? So we can see there's huge blind spots. They're not looking at details. This team could blow up as a result. They're not very supportive of each other. They're not long-term thinking. And they're not super connected to each other either. So these are going to be major issues that they need to just be aware of, if nothing else, and find ways to make up for that. Doesn't mean that they all have to love each other, they have to support each other, but the lack of that may be pathological at some point for this team. We got to talk about that. All right, let's move on to the next example. All right, so this team, notice that we still have some Indian chiefs here, some extroverts at least, but we also have some introverts on this team. So introvert extrovert divide we're seeing here. Okay, so now first of all, this team is very, very typical for a lot of businesses where you're going to have leaders and salespeople and people that have to go do the people stuff, and then you're going to have people that are kind of back office and running, the details and making sure the trains run on time. Okay, so this is more of a balanced team. And so the upsides here, the strengths are going to be that they're going to be able to, they're going to have a division of labor that's going to make a lot of sense. Chances are, if they properly divide up the labor, and they're going to probably be even more productive than the prior team because the D's can go fight the battles and win the wars and grow the business, and the C's and S's can, hold down the fort, and create some stability. So this is going to be a much more stable team as a result of that, if nothing else. Okay. A threat here is that the introverts might not be heard, and so they'll not notice. Sometimes teams like this cannot notice the problems, just like too many Indian chiefs don't notice the problem. It's almost like the C's are invisible to the D's a lot of times. Okay, so that's something to be very careful of as a threat and a possible weakness as well. What else? Yeah, I mean, those are some huge, again, we're talking very big picture stuff here, but there is a lack of stability on this team still just because of lack of S's, but the C's will probably make up for that. And we do have one SC here, who's actually got, actually, in fact, I think this guy might even have a bit of an S, but the point being that these guys are really good taskmasters. They probably have a little bit of a lack of people orientation because nobody's represented in this bottom half of the graph. So although that we have some introvert, extrovert, these are more task oriented. This is a more task oriented team, not as much people. Okay, so this team may end up being a little bit more inhumane than they should be, let's say. And we got to watch out for that as a threat or a weakness. Make sense? So let's clear this just for simplicity's sake. So my coaching for this team would be divide up the labor properly, and then watch out for where you're not looking at people's feelings, people's interactions, the connection of the team. This team may have a lack of glue, and it may not be very close knit. And then listen very closely to the C's, because they may not be heard because the D's are so damn loud. This is the classic coaching you would want to give to a diverse team like this, that although they're not going to have as many blind spots, the people are a big blind spot for them. And then also, just make sure that they appreciate everybody on the team, which might be kind of challenging for the egos of the D's. All right, let's move over here. This is a much more diverse team, you might notice. This is a much smoother wheel. This could be a really, really well-rounded wheel where they can just cover just about any element that needs to be covered in an executive team or in a small, a small business team, let's say. So this is fantastic. Everybody's represented. They're not going to have any real major blind spots. That's one huge strength as well. One of the risks or the weaknesses here could be that the lack of how would I put this? There may be some, although this team is very diverse, it might be underrepresented for what's needed on the team, depending on the team. Like if this is a sales team, we got maybe too many introverts here. If this is an executive team, maybe you've got some people that are not really dynamic as leaders, right? And we got to be careful about that. If this is, let's say, an administrative team, like what do we need all these marketing people for, right? Like that may not be needed on this team. So if this is a cross-functional team where they're working in many different areas and they got to kind of cover everything, or it's an entire business, okay, maybe that can work with the right division of labor. But if this team has like one trick that they need to play out all the time, this may be way more diverse than it needs to be, or even should be. And so that's be something I'd be careful of with a team like this. So my coaching for this team would be, what are you here for? Do we need to specialize? And if not, then great. You guys got very few blind spots. Just make sure, again, you're listening to the introverts, because they may not speak up the way that the D's and I's may speak up. Make sure they're heard, and then also let the D's and I's do what they do, which is go out there and do all sorts of crazy social stuff and cause some damage. And the C's and S's need to appreciate that they're there to clean up that mess, not there to complain and judge these other guys on the team. So there's going to be the biggest weakness, by the way, of this team, the coaching I would offer them is you guys really need to learn to understand each other as individuals, because this team is the world, and somebody that you may judge or make wrong is actually just a different type of person. You got to appreciate that. All right, let's move to the next graph. So we've gone all the way over to the introvert side here. And you can see that this is probably much more of a service team, or maybe it could be an accounting team, let's say. I've seen a lot of accounting companies that look exactly like this, So the strengths here, they're going to be amazing with details. They're going to be great probably with customer service. They're going to be long-term thinkers and be very they're going to be very persistent and consistent as well. But their weaknesses are going to be that they're going to be blind to a lot of really important social stuff. They're not going to close deals very often, and they're going to hide in their office a lot. So there's going to be challenges there, and that would be the kind of coaching I would offer them. Hey, Barbara, I'm just checking your chats here. Everyone have their own style. Sure. Group D has an individualistic point of view. Not necessarily. I mean, individualistic, I think more of as a value, but they will act individualistic. Let's put it that way, just because they will be much more intense about what they want, and they won't be shy about sharing it. C's and S's can also be very individualistic, but they're kind of quiet, relatively speaking. They're very shy about asserting that. So think of this as more assertive of whatever your individuality is, and this is much less assertive, more supportive. Like, I want to help these other people with what they want. I'm not even worried about what I want, but the D's are like, hey, this is what I want. I'm going to assert it on everybody else, right? So it's a different dynamic in terms of how that individuality plays out. All right, let's move on to the next graph. This is usually more of a creative or a social function team, because they're all very, so they're people. They're usually blue sky thinkers. They're usually very dynamic and very social and very creative in nature. So this kind of team can be amazing with coming up with cool ideas. Their creativity will be off the charts. They will brainstorm really excitingly and dynamically and come up with tons of ideas. They're not going to be as good with execution and organization. Chances are those are going to be weaknesses for them. And so they will take, 20 months to come up with the cure for cancer, but the job that they were given by the team leader, they never get around to, right? So those are some of the challenges, deadlines, and, just having productivity actually show up versus just, thinking about stuff. This could be an advertising team, some type of creative team, a team of artists, or like I said, social function type of team. So my coaching for this team would be, look, if this is what you're there for, great, but watch your deadlines and make sure you actually, organize this such that you can actually work together and do well and get the job done. And also, if you're not only there for that one type of job, you're going to be blind to the hardcore results you need to produce, the details that you're missing, and the risks also, chances are, because you're going to take all these crazy risks because you're so overly optimistic and blind to that. And you may not be as supportive of your customers, if not each other, as you need to be, ultimately deep down. And you may not be very persistent. You might just try stuff that you brainstormed once, and when it doesn't work, you quit. Those are problems, right? So that's going to be my coaching on for this team, is they need to make up for these blind spots and/or just manage themselves accordingly. And I doubt they would be able to do that long term because of all those eyes. All right, now let's look at this is a bunch of extroverts. We can see them on the extrovert side of the graph is over here, and at the same time, they're across the spectrum between hardcore results and people orientation. So they have a nice kind of a nice diversity there, but there's no introverts on the team, no detail-oriented people, no long-term thinkers. So this is more like a typical sales and marketing team. They're going to be great on going out to doing the next thing, making things happen, but their business will probably be disorganized and a bit of a mess, and it may not have staying power as a result of that. So I'd be very careful with this as an executive team. They need some C's and S's on their team to balance them out, at least one or two, to organize things. You don't need a lot. So a lot of times one C or one S will totally change the game for an overly extroverted team. So the D's will tend to dominate the I's here, because the I's are going to be more pleasers because they are so connection driven. So be careful of that. But the dynamics between these D's and I's will probably be a lot better than a lot of the dynamics we've already looked at here. All right, I think this is fine. Yeah, this is the final behavioral graph. So this particular group is very people-oriented. You can see it's all people-oriented people, I's and S's here. And there's a nice diversity between introvert and extrovert, but they got no task-oriented people on their team. So again, a lot of creatives and some supporters. But deadlines might be non-existent here. You might see a real lack of organization, and hardcore results as well might be a huge blind spot for this team. So they are going to probably talk to each other like crazy. They're going to socialize. They're going to all fall in love with each other, but they're going to have problems in terms of actual measurable results. They might go broke. They might end up, just careening off a cliff of lack of productivity. Let's put it that way. So let's talk values now. So here's a values graph that shows you've got nothing but economic and individualistic minded people. So this particular team will be probably entrepreneurial in nature, right? They want freedom, so they do it through economics, let's say. And they're going to have some huge blind spots, obviously. They're not going to appreciate rules or helping or knowledge, like just anything else, right? So they're just entrepreneurs that are out there just trying to make their way so they can be free, and they will have conflicts with each other or within the team or with themselves, because these two values argue with each other quite a bit between freedom and economics. You're going to have rifts within the team as a result of that. So there's going to be some weaknesses that we will see. But yes, they're entrepreneurs. They need some regulatory people on this team. They need some people who can keep the doors open while they're off on vacation for 3 months. They have economically minded people. That's great. As long as they're on the same page with the economics, that could work just fine. But my coaching for this team would be really just like it would be with an individual. Be careful of your drive for freedom, because it could wreck your economics, and then you're not free at all. So you got to get these two factions, whether they're internal conflicts or between different people conflicts, to make friends with each other so everybody wins as a result. And then just look out for the blind spots that are around the rest of this graph. All right, so let's check this one. This is a little bit different, still a very economically driven team, but now they want power. So this is generally a sales team. Economic power values, those are salespeople. So if that's the purpose of this team, I'm good. I don't have much coaching for them on that, except for appreciate the other departments and divisions. But if this is a business that's supposed to be cross-functional, like a business team that should be functional across many different dimensions, they're going to have challenges. They're just going to be politicking out there, trying to, make more money and get more profit. And they'll have, very little rules to govern them. That might break rules, end up getting in trouble with the law. They have maybe little knowledge base, depending on the industry. If it's a tech industry, that could be a problem. They may not be adding the kind of value that they need to add because of the lack of altruism, although economics tend to add a decent amount of value. So there's some real downsides, at least for a business team here, that I'm seeing. So I've seen teams like this, even if they're mostly salespeople. I've seen teams like this that in a dip or in a problem period or a crisis period, the business just dies. Because as soon, what's the purpose of this team? The purpose of this team is to make a bunch of money and, sorry, I got rid of our, the only problem with the PDF is it does that. But the purpose of this team is to make a bunch of money and run the world. What happens when they hit hard times and they're not making a bunch of money? What happens when they're not in charge anymore and they're not at the top of the hill? I'll tell you what happens. Most of these people quit. They just run for, they run for the hills, right? And so I've coached a team like this, 100 people, mostly salespeople, and they were in the mortgage industry, and then the mortgage crisis came in 2008. No more business. That business died because of their overarching values that were just all about profit for the moment and having lots of power. That's crushing for that. I mean, that wasn't a good team. I mean, they did well for a while, for a season. These people are great in spring and summer, and especially fall. Winter, these guys die because they have the lack of, they have blind spots and values that cause them to just pack up and quit when they're not getting what they want. So that's the thing to be careful of here, and that would be my coaching for that team. All right, let's move on to this particular value set, which is, now we've got some real conflicts here between the economic driven people and the regulatory and theoretical, because usually those are at odds a bit. It's because the economics want to break the rules so they can make more money, and the regulatory want to stick with what they believe in, right? So regulatory are going to be a little bit too dogmatic, and economic are going to rub them the wrong way. Now, this could be accountants, and that could work really well because they need both, right? There's still going to be conflicts in that area ultimately. So there's something to be careful of here. That would be my coaching for this team, that why are the regulatory people on this team if it's just a business team, or why are the economic people on this team if this is mainly a regulatory team? Like, what are they for? So we got to see, are they functional, or are they just there to profit or take advantage of something, or they're just there because they got stuck there? There might be some changing of who's on the team, depending on what the function of that team is. All right, here's another set of values that we see on a team. Still a bunch of economics, but now we've got altruists as well, and this is a direct conflict too. So you got people that want to give, and people that want to get. Okay, so these two are going to have to find a way to work that particular conflict out. And why are both factions in one team? Is this a not-for-profit? Okay, great. Then the economics might be there to serve their purpose, to make sure the not-for-profit grows, and then they can make money in the process through their income, let's say. Okay, that might be fine. And the altruist can be out there, with their bleeding hearts and inspiring everybody to contribute to the not-for-profit. That could work out okay. But I would just question whether both value sets are needed depending on the function of the team. Again, if this team is like a community team or it's a family or something like that, that's going to be very, very different. Talking business, though, this could create not only ill dynamics and conflicts, but it also could create real problems for the function of the team as well. All right, and how many? I think we got, 2 left? Yeah, we got 2 left. So second to last one here. This is, sorry, I got to get rid of the notes first. This is a team that hopefully is going to be more like IT or information driven, because the theoretical drive on the team. So we have theoretical economics. So this would be great if they're tech based, or if they're knowledge workers. This could be fantastic. But if they're not, if they're just like real estate agents or something, why do we need those theoreticals on the team? I'd question that. So there's going to be, again, conflicts on this team between the economic and theoretical. They might use knowledge to create profit. It could be like information marketing or education, for-profit education organization. That could be great if that's what we're talking about here. But there still could be a rift on this team because of that, and they might not see eye to eye, so we're going to need to mend that issue. All right, final value set. This is, as you might imagine, this is everywhere. This is a highly diverse team. So what's great about a highly diverse team like this is they're not going to have any blind spots. Every value set is represented, at least in the top 2 values. The downside, obviously, is going to be they're going to be at odds on a regular basis. You're going to have factions that will join up to find common interests and fight against each other, possibly, unless they really know how to get along. And again, what is the function of this team? Why do I need somebody who's altruistic or theoretical or even economic on the team, depending on the function of the team? If it's a cross-functional team, again, this could be just fine. This could be the best scenario, but they're going to need a lot of communication training and understanding the differences in the values that are going on there. So here's your assignment for working with some of these aspects. And by the way, I do want to also just mention that as the leader grows, the teams that are attracted to them and the team dynamic will change. So I'll tell you, I mean, like a decade ago, I would attract, non-committal team members, people that had drinking problems, criminals, opportunists. And we had all sorts of ups and downs on the team because like I wasn't a very strong business yet. I wasn't a strong leader or business person at that point. So we'd have all sorts of reasons why I would attract like not the best team members or not the best dynamic on the team. And then over time, I grew who I was. People like Alan Myers, who's running our ICF programs, or Jan Marie Mueller or Kim or Coach Fariel came onto the team and really grew our business and helped our business stabilize. And they all are in different places behaviorally and values wise, but it all fit. And part of the reason was because who I became. I grew myself, which attracted better people and more commitment and better communication on the team as a result. but I also had to improve who I brought into the team, who I selected, and how I built team members and coached them for the best outcome as well. So you have these choices, and your clients sometimes have these choices as well as to who they can have on the team or off the team, who they're assembling, who's leading the team and what their level is, like how well they can lead, and how valuable they are to the team as a leader or supporting on the team, a servant leader, let's say. And then finally, how these people, how productive they are individually and as a group, and how they can dynamically communicate with each other to make the best of every team member and the group as a whole as well. So here's now the assignments I'm going to offer you. Number one, look at your graphs, look at your wheels. Number two, see if any of your wheels match these examples. And number three, see what descriptions show up in your group according to what I said. Like, what have I described here that actually is showing up in your teams? Observable behavior of the group, ways that they're behaving. Just watch them behave and see, are they matching up with what I'm describing here? Also, you can listen to the claims of the leader. If the leader says, yep, that's what's going on, okay, that's a sign that we might be pretty on point here with some of the descriptions. Also, listen to what the group says about what they see in the group and how the group shows up as well. So that said, hope you learned some things around how these groups actually show up, the typical patterns in the groups. But like I said, there is no typical. You got to read these as they come, and hopefully get some information about the group beyond what you have in your graphs as well. And understand, like I said, the goals of the group, who's leading the group, what communication skills do they have, because there's all sorts of other things that these graphs cannot possibly predict, they can't possibly measure, but this can tell you a lot right up front, as demonstrated tonight. So my request for you is like this video, share it with people that really need to understand their teams, their families, their communities, and the different types of people on the teams and these technologies. And I will talk to you next week, in week 8 of our Assessment Immersion Training. Take care until then.